Here in Kalamazoo.
Janine Brown. Gabriela De La Cruz.
Here in Kalamazoo.
Jessica Glenn.
Here in the city of Kalamazoo.
Angela Graham Williams.
I am present in the county of Kalamazoo.
Marissa Harrington.
Present in Kalamazoo.
Deshaun Houston.
Present in Kalamazoo.
Okay. So can I give my welcome and streaming information at this time? Welcome to the January 6, 2021 Civil Rights Board meeting. Just a reminder that for public comment, please call 269-226-6573 and leave a voice message limited to 3 minutes. During citizens' comments, your voice message will be played back for the good of the order. Notice of closed caption: the City of Kalamazoo's live streaming platforms, Facebook and YouTube, do not currently offer live closed caption. However, please note that the public meetings are recorded and upon conclusion are made available with closed caption for the hearing impaired. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Director Bonner. And I'd like to move to a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Seconded, Dr. Angela Graham Williams.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Perfect, thank you. Also, you should have your meeting notes. Are there any questions or concerns regarding notes from December 23rd?
And you're referring to the agenda, correct? I mean, the minutes of the meeting, correct? When you say meeting notes, the minutes.
Meeting notes, or sorry, minutes, excuse me, I apologize.
That's okay.
I hear none. I'd like to move to a motion to approve those as they are.
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, motion approved. All right, we are going to now move on to public announcements and communications.
Oh, I guess it would be me. The communication I would like to share with you all that could inform our work as we go on, maybe in some ways, not inform, but so you would know what the city is doing, is that on Monday night, the commission approved a proposal to perform for the Michigan Public Health Institute to perform an assessment, a diversity, equity, and inclusion assessment of the city of Kalamazoo. This is an inward look. It will look at our HR records, our hiring practices, promotions. It would survey staff. The goal is to just gauge the culture and the pulse of our internal workings. And then we will write an equity plan from that. And the goal is that the ultimate goal for me, as I say it, is to have diversity, equity, inclusion embedded into the culture and DNA of our organization. So our work going outward will reflect that culture. So just to keep you, anytime there's something to do with civil rights or equity, I want you all to be aware of what it is. And I know you also heard that the city manager made a statement Monday acknowledging our issues, our historical, it's hard to even explain without reading the statement, but as a government, we have a history when it comes to diversity, equity, inclusion, and the first step of doing better is to acknowledge. So made some big steps this week already. It's only Wednesday. So just to keep you abreast, and of course, for the other thing that's going on is our civil right, is our independent review of police activities, response to the protests. So those information sessions, not information sessions, but public input sessions are this coming Monday night and on the 25th, where folks will be able to share their experiences. So if you know folks that were part of the protest, experienced the protest, have an opinion about the protest, a concern, please make sure that they participate in those events. And I think that's all I have.
Director Bonner, will that first report be made public, or something that as a Civil Rights Board we will have access to see a summary of or review?
Which report? Because I talked about.
The diversity, equity, and inclusion
Yes.
internal look one.
It will be a public report. Yep.
Fantastic. It's exciting news.
Yeah, and I try to encourage people. The reason I wanted to talk about it, to make sure people know this is an internal, this is us looking at us to help us be better for us and everybody else. So, but all of those reports are public reports. Anything else? Attorney Robinson, Vice Mayor. All right. Thank you for that time.
Thank you, Director Bonner. All right, so we're going to keep moving in our agenda to discuss new business. We're going to open up a discussion regarding Civil Rights Board parameters and what we want our parameters to be. So let's open it up for discussion.
Well, during our last meeting, in the final comments, Director Glenn mentioned, looking at like possibly the city charter and other, I guess, ordinances in the city to see like whether they really like conform to, or like whether they really honor civil rights. And so I was thinking we could talk about that a little bit further. I haven't considered this very much in detail, so I think it'd be nice to like brainstorm, I guess.
So I think that is a great point. I guess I first have a question around, I think expanding of what our complete, are we talking about what our complete scope is, or specific projects of what we're hoping to start looking at? Because I guess I'm hoping for some clarification. Are we talking about what is our scope, or talking about some action items and some things we want to start doing?
I think it would probably be helpful to talk about the overall scope first, and then once we know that, we can zone in on different projects.
I would agree. I just wanted to make sure I understood. I think I'll speak for what I hope to see kind of in the next at least couple meetings is I think we first really need to dig into the ordinances, what created us. I would like to see us really start dissecting and interpreting the ordinances and what that means for us over the next couple meetings or wherever that needs to happen. And outside of those ordinances, I think it is then looking at how do we extend those supplemental classes that aren't covered that we've touched on in other times is what I would, I guess, talking about scope is, I think we still need some foundation before I fully know what our entire scope is. I don't know if we have I don't know if I feel we have a strong enough foundation yet.
And thank you, Director Beach. I think that a lot of it is going to come from the protected classes, where is going to be really the foundation of where we start first, to help define, because we don't want to reinvent the wheel with what's already in place from the state and also federal law. Because I was thinking about this as well, and what avenue we have to be able to have a pathway to anything that's not covered, and it'll start there. So I think a lot of our discussions in the next probably weeks for a while will probably be around understanding the protected classes, and what, knowing those in and out, so that we know and we can come to cases when we hear them and judge them correctly. Some comments?
And so that I'm clear to Chairman Houston, your point is for us as a body to better understand what a protected class is, and the remedies available to protected classes?
Yeah, and I think that I don't know what parameters we will have. And we certainly don't want to reinvent the wheel, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. If we don't know those from the state and federal level, I don't know if we will understand the scope of the authority scope and authority and recommendations that we can make around ordinances.
Yeah, and this body isn't meant to supplant what exists, right? And we are actually prohibited from reinventing the wheel in the structure of the ordinance. So I just want to ground us in that, that we would not be hearing cases involving discrimination based on a protected class. And so I wonder if it would be helpful then for the general public, including our body, to have not necessarily on the record or as part of our meeting, but actually do a Know Your Rights presentation to a fuller extent about the various federal and state civil rights laws and protections, what a protected class includes, so that people who potentially could bring claims understand where they would go, but also the scope of our work. And it's clear to me that the scope of our work is supplementing those laws, right? Like there is a great deal of discrimination that happens in our community that falls outside of the scope of state and federal law. And so what does that look like? So I think having a Know Your Rights presentation and training would be really helpful. But I want to also restate something I mentioned last time. Like this board is comprised of people who are really in the community, right? And doing the work. And I wonder if it would behoove us to talk from that experience about what challenges have you had doing that work? And I'd encourage, again, the public to, call in and talk about that. But I honestly could rattle off, a dozen different discrimination-related issues that my clients face and the communities I've advocated for have, and ways in which we can step in. But I agree completely with those who have already spoken that having a better foundation as a community and understanding non-discrimination laws, civil rights, affirmative civil rights protections, and what already exists in terms of protected classes is really step one. I would be reticent to use our time in this forum to do that. And I don't think we'd reach the community in the way that we would hope to.
Thank you, Director Glenn. Can I ask a question about your Know Your Rights presentation? Is that something that you think that this board should do, or it be done in a different capacity?
I think we could we could work in collaboration of some of the already existing efforts to do that. I know that AllPact has a series of Know Your Rights presentations. One is specifically around housing. One's about your rights in the criminal justice process. I think that we could, put together a panel to speak to specifically civil rights and where to go if you're a possible claimant or experiencing discrimination, so that proper referral is being made, but also that people know what it is that would reach us and why, or why something wouldn't, right?
I like that. Thank you so much for the clarification. Yes, ma'am. Yes, Director Williams.
My question is to Director Glenn. I'm certain I'm not following your point about what is not a good use of the time here on this board, because what I hear directors saying is that there's a level of uncertainty that perhaps you don't have as an attorney, but maybe that they do. And while we're awaiting our cases to hear and adjudicate or the process, I wonder if not, then when would be a good time? I mean, I'm hesitant for those who talk about, just again, you say with uncertainty, to not use this time, because I think it is a time for us to grow. And perhaps that's not what you said. I just want some more clarification behind that point, because I think it won't be a good use of our time once we show up and Ms. Dorla has 10 cases for us to discuss, and then some of us are unsure about what it means to be a protected class and how the process fits. So can you help me understand your point there?
Yeah, I mean, I think that using if the purpose is the edification of our board in this body, I'm totally good with that. So maybe it's a both and situation. I also want to make sure that there is a very conscious effort of our board to provide that same training in the most user-friendly way to the community, because we could all become experts on civil rights laws, but if we don't assist our community in understanding what they are and how to exercise them, then, you know, we will have a fabulously educated board, but no possible complaints. So yeah, thanks for your clarification. And perhaps it is a both and situation.
Thank you.
Director Harrington's raising her hand, so I'll let her go first.
Thank you. Can y'all let me know what the protocol is? Because I don't want to talk over anybody, but I will. God, I'm just saying. But I'm gonna raise my hand first. So Director Glenn, I think that is a brilliant suggestion. So to have some sort of training or trainings, plural, for the community, and even if it's something as simple as Zoom, and broadcast it out, but have that available, because we are supposed to be accessible, right? And so I wholeheartedly agree with that. I also agree with Dr. Graham Williams in that right now at this moment, and I'm not saying that we're talking in circles, but we're bordering that right now. Can we just write down and list, like, okay, these are all the things that we should be looking for, because that conversation has to be had. So let's just have it right now. We know what the protected classes are. We went through our training. So what are not the protected classes? And let's write that down so they can be on record, be in the minutes. And we're starting the conversation about what we are supposed to be looking for and listening for in our hearing sessions. So I can go first. People being discriminated against because of low credit scores. That's my contribution. Who else has one?
Legal status.
Criminal history, right, is one, I believe.
We're going to be talking about source of income, so source of payments, voucher type of assistance. Director Bonner, I think, has a.
I have a point of clarification for myself. Because what I hear you doing is listing current protected classes, local protected classes, and new protected classes. So I think my recommendation is to kind of slow up a little bit, and let's make sure that we all understand what it is we're assigned to do and have a good understanding of because there's a list of local protected classes that you will be responsible for, that we have not really had a lot of conversation about, and that's what's going to be coming to you. So I don't want, you know what I'm saying?
So I was, I think because my first point got, I think, lost, and where my point was not that I think we need to do some homework, because what I've heard in my work and in the community is we have now these protected classes, but what does it mean? We have these new ordinances, but what do these new ordinances actually mean? In my work with landlords, I hear a lot of feedback of, I can't charge application fees. That's not fair. What does this mean? I hear a lot of conversations from, well, now I can't choose I don't get to choose who goes into my unit. That's not what this means. I think it's our role as this board to really dig into these materials and provide that clarification, have these discussions, and educate our community about I think we have to do that first before we start talking about what's next. I think this is a really monumental point for our community, especially as we can't ignore the elephant in the room of what is happening on the TV, on the news in our capital. this is a special space we're in, and I want to make sure, I think it's really important that we really dig into what we have and what the boulder has been lifted up to get on top of this mountain to get us here. Let's dig into that and provide that clarification for our community, for the people we serve. So we all have buy-in, we all have, because there's not, I know we all believe in this ordinance, but we also have to recognize there is not universal buy-in to these ordinances. This was not an easy lift. And so I think we have to really dig in and hear those voices too, and hear those, and like really pull that apart before before this group, I think, dives into what's next. And I hear Director Bonner, her advice of let's not get ahead of ourselves. I think we're all really excited, but yeah.
Thank you, Director Beach. Director Williams.
I want to also thank all of you directors, Harrington and Beach. I agree completely with your point, and I think it's a nice segue into the next agenda item about the discussion of methods to increase public awareness, as we are increasing public awareness, not just of the board, but of what this board was conceived to, the change we were conceived to make, and educating the community. Just as Directors Glenn and De La Cruz were saying, I think that piece has to go hand in hand as we are marketing and branding, if you will, ourselves, and ensuring that the community knows that we are here to serve them. But what does it mean to serve them, and in what ways can we serve them? And I just feel like that's just a wonderful, not to, move on the agenda, but I just wanted to make sure we pair those agenda items together, because I really see that there's some continuity that can occur in that space.
Thank you, Director Williams. So question, this is probably to Director Bonner. When and how can we have access to the ordinances that have been established pertaining to what the city has?
You have
I think
them.
you said it's being created though.
No, nothing's being created.
We have it.
You have them.
Gotcha.
We
That's
have
the
it.
Chapter 18A, the Chapter 18 and the 18A.
Gotcha.
And can I say something else while I'm talking? Because you were talking more about training. And so there is training that's going to start this month for the landlords and residents. Hopefully, I think we have a total of 25 trainings planned for residents with the Fair Housing Center of Southwest Michigan. And then we have trainings for landlords that are starting this month. That would be, and those trainings will be on the state, like it would be the training that you all went to, that same training. So I don't want you, so we are trying, it's just a lot of people, a lot of people that need to be trained.
Director Williams.
I didn't hear you. My apologies. At those trainings, Ms. Dorlo, will this board be defined and our processes communicated? Because that wasn't necessarily on our training, because we were training ourselves and we know who we are and what it is we're doing because of just the interview process. But I was wondering if that it could be an addition to the training for the residents and the landlords who will be in attendance for them. Is that an opportunity? Is that a time that you would deem appropriate for us as we do start to, again, market ourselves to the community?
Well, the training, what we present, and you tell me if this is not enough, what we present is that we have a civil rights board. We present the complaint process is that a person will file a complaint and it's evaluated by the city attorney's office or his designee. And then the results of that will come to you all for a decision. And that's what's done all the time. Now, we didn't have a board seated. I was just sitting here writing notes as we go on. We could have one of you all join us, because it's different when it's the people who's going to be doing it. If that would help, I just, it's up to you, and I have to get approval, not approval, but to set it up. But if that's a good time for you to introduce yourselves to the community. But it's really simple. It's not a lot to say other than that it will come to you after it's investigated. and then you all will determine based on the ordinance what should happen.
So it sounds so, which I think is actually really good because it shows presence, right? So it shows presence and that we actually exist and we're here. So my question is you also said something, Director Bonner, about resident training and Director Williams tied in marketing. My question is so I understand that there's a rent roll process, and I'm sure that these landlords receive information regarding this. There's been correspondence that's gone out. The other part of it is how are we just publicly announcing Facebook message, mailing for residents for such training as well?
Well, I am waiting on our provider to let me know how they're doing that. The landlords were a little more straightforward because they're on the rental registration, because all landlords have to, which is something else you might want to learn about someday, about the rental registration process, because it's directly connected but not connected. But you would hear, I think people will bring it up, so you'll know what it's about. But they were easier to reach out to because we have to have them. We have yet to hear from the Fair Housing Center of Southwest Michigan of how they're going to advertise their training.
Gotcha. Director Harrington.
I just wanted to get back to the agenda because we did kind of skip ahead a little bit. So we wanted to discuss expanding Kalamazoo's existing protected classes, right? So that we make sure that we're very clear on what our parameters are. Is there a way to pull that up right now so that we can see it on the screen and have that discussion?
Well,
So can I have I would like to have the discussion of, I don't know if that's an appropriate discussion yet. I don't, from the conversation I just heard, I don't think it's an appropriate conversation to talk about I'm not sure if it's I don't know if we're there yet, I guess. I think we need to learn the current order. I guess that's my recommendation, is I don't know if the agenda item is appropriate for this discussion yet in our development.
Can we just have a discussion about it then? Like, can we just pull it up and look at what it actually says?
So what do you want me to pull up? That's what do you want me to pull up?
The ordinance that has the Kalamazoo's existing protected classes.
Chapter 18 and chapter 18.
Okay.
While Dorla is attempting to pull that up, I have the text in front of me. I'm not able to pull it up, so I'll read it off. And it is, you may not discriminate on a person's actual or perceived, so I'll read these slowly. Race, color, religion, national origin, sex, age, height, weight, marital status, physical or mental disability, family status, sexual orientation, gender identity. And so all of those are already covered at state and federal law.
Right.
Now we go into the ones that are unique to Kalamazoo. Educational affiliation, source of income, status as a victim of domestic violence, governmental identification method, arrest record, and conviction record.
May I ask a question, Attorney Robinson?
Sure.
Specific around the governmental identification method, is that also Kalamazoo's governmental method of ID, really is what I'm asking. I understand that state and federal ID probably cover
Yes,
this.
it is because the Kalamazoo County does have a identification program that you can get if you can't otherwise get identification. This was put in so as to say that if somebody's got the county ID, you've got to accept that.
Okay. And I asked that question because it opens up for me in the banking field, and I'm not sure you can help me, Attorney Robinson and other fellow board members. In my industry, in the banking industry, we are not able to use a city issued ID. That can pose as discrimination because we can't accept that. We only can accept state and federal. Attorney Robinson, is that an area of concern as it relates to banking?
Well, the issue becomes, is it,
Application banking and
and
things like
because banking, you are governed by state and federal law, we can't,
Mhm.
require something that is prohibited by state and federal law.
Gotcha. And I figured that as much, but I just wanted to ask that question because I know that this is a thing that I've wondered carries over to every single area, whether it be government or whether that be housing. That's a thought process that I had. So thank you.
And maybe this will be a little helpful because we talked about supplementing. Look at it as kind of a ladder or a pyramid. You got the federal authority at the top, so in large measure. You've got underneath that state authority. And then below that, you've got municipal authority. And as a municipality in Michigan, Kalamazoo can't prohibit what is permitted, nor can we prohibit or permit what is otherwise prohibited. I think I got them both right.
You got it.
Hope I said it. Hopefully I didn't say the same thing twice. But we can't prohibit what's permitted, nor can we permit what is prohibited.
Thank you, sir.
Director Houston, I just wanted to say, if I could really quickly, just to clarify, Attorney Robinson, when he read the additional protected classes, there was one change that was made in terms of it was status as a survivor of domestic violence instead of a victim of domestic violence. And that is pretty important. So I just wanted to highlight that. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Griffin.
Thank you.
Director
So,
Aaron, question, or did I answer your question?
yes, and as those were read out, and I'm taking notes, then to go back to what I think why this was put on the agenda, correct me if I'm wrong, is just for us to identify how we as a committee could have other things that aren't covered. So things gosh, words, Marissa. So Vice Mayor Griffin just said that if you are a survivor of domestic violence, you are protected. Not if you are currently a victim of it. Is that correct?
Vice Mayor, do you mind clarifying?
No, that wasn't the
No?
distinction.
Okay.
No, it wasn't made for that distinction.
Okay.
And I would allow Director Glenn, if you want to expand upon that, because I know you had a significant part to do with why that language was changed.
Okay. Yes. Thank you. See, these are the conversations I was wanting to have. I just want clarification on what the ordinances actually say, so that we can then go, okay, and what about, or should we consider? I think that's the work that we need to be doing right now.
So this sounds like to me the parameters conversation is exactly what we're going to have.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and we defined the term survivor of domestic violence in the ordinance, and there is several subparts to that, but it basically does not mean that if you're currently undergoing domestic violence, you're protected.
Would I be brass to say like someone living, right? Like someone living that's not passed away. Is that what we mean?
Oh yeah, you have to be a living person in order to be protected.
Okay. I know that might sound silly. Go ahead, Director Glenn.
Right. And I think it's a philosophical conversation, right? It's one
Right.
where if somebody is still experiencing domestic violence, you still have survived it, right? You're still with us, you're still alive. And in most of the literature now, that isn't specifically focused on criminal justice, the criminal justice system or criminal justice statutes, survivor is just the nomenclature that is used. Can I say too that, and this is, I hope this doesn't get us too far afield, but in thinking through these classes, right? I wonder too if it would be helpful for us to have a conversation about how this discrimination actually occurs and looks, right? Because for survivors of domestic violence, it's not necessarily that when they're applying for a rental agreement or lease, that someone would be able to say, you look like a victim of domestic violence, right? Like, I'm not going to rent to you. What it usually looks like is someone is in a lease agreement or is renting and calls to service. So having police respond to your home is the argument of many landlords has been, you are creating an unsafe living situation for other residents, right? And so this type of conversation is what I think would be helpful too as we go through this. Like, all right, we said you can't discriminate based on type of ID. What does that look like here, right? Like, what does that look like in Kalamazoo? Where do we need further edification and elucidation of what that might look like to give some hypotheticals to both the community, but I think too, to the point of having a board member in these meetings now, in these trainings with landlords for this very reason. Like, what does this look like? Here's what we're paying attention to. Here are our concerns. Because in the training that we received as a body, again, they were focused on state and federal law and not these additional protections at the municipal level, at the city level. So what will that look like? And so I do think it, and again, not to derail us too far, I like the idea that we're going through this ordinance step by step in this meeting to talk about that. But as we get to these various classes, I would just encourage us to have some conversation about like, okay, well, let's stop. What does that look like?
Thank you, Director Glenn. Director Williams.
Thank you, Director Glenn, as well. I thank you as well. And I have heard a couple of us say, not to derail or not to get off of topic or not to stray too far from our agenda, but I think that this professional development is so important on so many levels. Not only does it bring us together as a group, but it helps us to really hone in, because we all come from different aspects of industry and we all have our areas of expertise. And so while I am a psychologist, I had no idea about that potential discrimination that can happen in banking. And I think it is so positive. So I just want to, and certainly Director Houston is the chair, and I'm hoping he doesn't mind, but if it's possible, just to really affirm us all in our ability to just speak freely and allow the conversation to go where it needs to go, and ask that we just lose some of these inhibitions, because this is tough and serious and profound work that we're doing. And I just want us all to feel empowered that whatever questions we have as we continuously improve this board and in ourselves individually, that we just give ourselves the space to do that. I certainly don't have any issue with if the conversation goes somewhere else. We are not adjudicating cases today, possibly not for the next couple months, who knows? But while we have this time together, let us just feel safe. Again, that's a psychologist in me, if you will, though, indulge me in enabling us to just feel comfortable in discussing whether they're insecurities or our lack of knowledge or whatever it is. So that's just the point. And I just want to also add, to underscore the importance I think Ms. Dorla made about one of us being at some of these trainings, because we want to be approachable and we want our community to realize that we are here and we have questions and we're fallible, we're human just like they are. But I just think it puts a face, if you will, a virtual face to the process. And I'm certainly willing to support and help in any way we can, because very often there's just these layers in between the people who need the services and those who are making their decisions. And we just want, if we can, I would like to see us disband those layers and have a fully transparent and approachable process. That's just the point I wanted to make.
Thank you, Director Williams. Certainly, I think that we can totally open the floor up to any personal experiences. That's why we're here. To discuss that or continue on with getting clarification on any of the ordinances and what they mean. And getting
So
advice.
I want to make sure, because we have been in a meeting for 42 minutes, and I want to make sure, like, because I think it's very important to have these conversations, but I also think the most impactful conversation when we started going through the ordinances and having a dialogue where Director Glenn shared what the ordinance actually says and where we had those conversations. So I would like us, I'm great with having the conversation, but I want to make sure we are somewhat action driven and aren't talking in circles, and like kind of go through it in a meaningful and to have full conversations. And I don't necessarily know if it's just this meeting, but chunking it out of let's talk about what these protected classes mean. Because I want to make sure the community members can follow along too, and also can make comments. So we can say we're talking about these parts of the ordinances tonight. Please make comment. Please let us know what your thoughts are. And when we just hop around, I think we're doing a disservice to the community, so they can't be engaged in this conversation as well.
Director Beach, I don't feel like we were hopping around. I think that there are 2 agenda items, and they seemed pretty vague, and that's no criticism of the agenda items. I think that they were purposely built that way to have conversation. And so while I agree that we need to keep with our agenda, and there will be nights when our agenda is so long that we won't be able to really concentrate, but I just feel like that's what we were doing, quite frankly, that we were discussing these issues. And I respectfully disagree that we should speed through this process, because I think, especially early on, that it's necessary for us to flesh out some of these concerns.
And and thank you. And my point wasn't that we need to speed through it, is I just want to make sure we're doing it in a way where we can allow for the community to engage in dialogue of, instead of us talking about ID to then going to what being a survivor of domestic violence means, we can go through and talk about, let's go through ordinances 18, like the first 5 points, and we're talking about these things today. Because I don't want you to think that I want to speed through this process, but I want to make sure we also can allow for the community to engage in it as well.
Vice Chair Taylor Cruz. Thank you, Director Beach.
What Director Beach just said made me realize, like, I think in a lot of organic conversations, people will pick up on whatever speaks to them. So I think regardless of if we go like in a certain order or follow a certain structure, or if we talk about things organically like we've been doing, I think when something touches upon something that someone feels, then they'll feel like calling the number and commenting on that. I mean, that's what I would do. But anyway, I have a question about source of income, because I think this will be relevant to anyone who is listening. I think I remember from one of our trainings, Director Glenn she clarified about what source of income meant. And so I think her question had to do with a lot of undocumented people, like that can be, like in my experience, talking about my experience, my parents, that was like a very gray area before they were in the process for obtaining residency and then citizenship. And so, there are a lot of different methods to getting a paycheck if you're not documented. And so what I remember from the training was that Director Glenn asked for clarification, and she asked whether in the city of Kalamazoo, with this source of income protection, if you have a W-2, is that enough to be protected against discrimination for the source of income? And I think that question's for Attorney Robinson. So is a W-2 enough to be protected against discrimination against source of income?
Or Attorney Robinson, or you can define what are all the ways that are applicable for source of income, what can be used in the process.
I'm trying to learn. I think we defined that, and I'm looking for the definition. Yeah, a source of income is and this is the way it's defined. It says lawful, verifiable income derived from wages, salaries, or other compensation for employment, money derived from a gift or bequest, contract, including insurance proceeds, a loan, or the settlement of an award or a claim for personal injury. It also includes, but it's not limited to, Social Security benefits, supplemental security income, unemployment benefits, retirement income, alimony, child support, federal housing choice voucher, the local housing assistance fund millage, or any housing subsidy. So to answer your question, yes, a W-2 would be proof of verifiable income from wages.
Thank you, Attorney Robinson.
What we did not want, and again, this language was put in place so that if a person supported themselves through unlawful means, a landlord didn't have to rely upon that source of income.
Director One.
So I want to clarify too that when I hear the word unlawful, I think about illegal acts, and I think about theft and using the proceeds of a criminal act, not somebody who is working a job in which they may not have the proper employment authorization document. And so I would like some clarification. Perhaps you could assist us with this, Attorney Robinson, and maybe it's just looking into the statutory language, but frankly, lawful to me, I would interpret that as this board, right? To mean any way you're paying your rent that isn't through criminal act. Right? Which is certainly isn't somebody who is undocumented or doesn't have the requisite immigration status. That's not illegal. They're working a job. They're performing labor for which they're entitled to payment. Otherwise, that's trafficking, right? Or a wage and hour violation. And so if you are able with an ITN number to say, I actually filed taxes and have a W-2 or a statement from your employer that they have an income, then that would be legal employment.
And so
I just wanted to clarify my position just in terms of legal versus non-legal.
And I think it's important for source of income. This affects, I work on the housing field. Most times when someone is, a household is receiving any sort of subsidy, or whether it be a voucher, short-term subsidy or long-term subsidy, landlords have the ability to not count that towards a household's income. So they may still require a tenant to have 3 times their monthly rent, even if agency or the federal government is paying 100% of it. They can still require them to have sufficient income. From my interpretation, what this ordinance was designed, this part of the ordinance was designed to do is, if your rent is being paid, a landlord has to count that as income towards that rent. So if an organization, if the state or if the federal government is going to say, we are paying 100% of your rent, it does not matter necessarily what that household's income is. Because you can have someone agreeing to pay your full rent and still get denied because they don't want to accept subsidy or they don't want to accept
Exactly. Which is the most common source of discrimination here.
I watch people get denied for it, have cash in hand, and it happens all the time.
Go right ahead. You don't have to raise your hand. Just go right ahead and speak.
I have another question. So I think I know the answer, but I'm not sure. So during our training, I think it was me who asked whether, like, let's say somebody has a complaint, and then the Michigan Department of Civil Rights representative answered. So anyway, my question was, if someone has a complaint and then they're found, it's found to not be discrimination, then the complainant is still entitled to protection from retaliation. And the Michigan Department of Civil Rights said yes. they're still entitled to protection, even though their complaint was found to not be discrimination. So I don't know if this connects, but I'm wondering if I'm trying to find a hypothetical, but I'm just going to see if like this makes sense. So let's say somebody feels like they're being discriminated against, and then in like the way that the cards fall, it turns out that they are undocumented. I'm under the my understanding is Kalamazoo County is a sanctuary county. So like, is there any way, is there any vulnerability for these people to like, I guess, essentially be preyed upon if they expose themselves in this way? You know, like, is there a danger if they make a complaint? Is there a danger against, you know, their status in the community? Like, do people in the community have a reason to like be afraid to be visible in regards to our board?
So is your question or concern that if someone had a discrimination complaint in regards to their status, and just by mere putting themselves out there, are they putting themselves and their family at risk of being targeted, I guess?
Yeah, it's that, but it doesn't have to be, you know, in terms of their status, because I know that that's not one of our supplemental protected classes. It could be any of the, like, you know, a survivor of domestic violence or source of income, any of that. So I'm wondering, is there like I feel like there's like a safety net because we are a sanctuary county, but I'm wondering, like, is that real? You know, because I know, like, personally, I know that people are going to be worried about that. Like, some people
right.
don't open the door when people it.
I've had clients who were, you know, kicked out of apartments or lost a security deposit. And the landlord say to them, like, we will call ICE on you, right? And use that as a consistent threat when they raised any issue with, you know, the apartment not being in working order. So I think that's real, right? Like, even if we're a sanctuary city, even if we're a board that says we are here to lift up, you know, discrimination issues, that at the individual personal level, the risk may far outweigh any benefit conferred and may discourage people. And, you know, from my perspective, it's why I too asked about the question of anonymity and the possibility of bringing complaints using a pseudonym, because I think that it mitigates danger. Like, let's say the landlord themselves hasn't threatened to call ICE or the police or to cause harm to a survivor. But someone in the community watching a public hearing may have more nefarious objective, right? And so I would just say that, like, all the more reason to address this issue of possible use of pseudonym or
and I think that's to Director Gunn's point. I think that pseudonym or anonymity is important across the board because we are hearing complaints. We are not hearing proven. Yes, there'll be some vetting to see if it was a valid, but I just think by the time they get to this point, having some protection of like, this is a hearing where you can be heard, but like you're also, I think that is important. And I would like us to figure out if there was a way for us to make that happen.
Yeah, I was just about to say that, Director Beach, that is there precedent for like a process for people to be able to do that via this forum? Do they write in? Do they have someone speak on their behalf? Like, what is that process? Is it the role of this board to decide how people can bring a complaint forward without anyone knowing who they are? Is that a part of our role? Because if so, I'm just going to put it out there that I think it would be a good idea to have them write it in and maybe have one of us read it, or instead of having them come themselves, right? Or maybe they could record their complaint and we can listen to it.
point of clarification, Director Harrington, when you say anonymity, you're talking about from the like this being a public meeting, not
Correct.
the complaint, not the respondent not knowing.
Correct. Yes. Yeah,
Just
because
in a
our
public forum, because our meetings
that
are
is
public.
correct. Yes.
Okay,
That's
just wanted to make sure I was on the same page.
yeah, that's my concern. I mean, for us to know who they are is fine. I just mean our meetings are recorded, they are public. And so we have to create some sort of a system or options for people. These are all the ways that you can bring a complaint forward. You can record it. Don't say your name. Don't give away any, information, personal information about yourself, but we will play it and then discuss. You can write in. So I think we just need to decide what those things are.
Director Williams, hold on one second. Hey, Director Bonner, can I ask you what the process is today about filing a complaint? Because we haven't done, I know that we did it, but I actually don't remember it. So excuse me, but can we have an overview of the process again and all the ways to file a complaint and if there is an ability for anonymity?
I'm going to defer to Attorney Robinson because this is new for me too. I know there's another a group that does it, and I haven't. Their process is different, so I don't want to refer to that one.
Sure. The ordinance provides that any complaint must be in writing. It must be signed. You can get somebody to assist you with filing it, but it has to be a written filing in which the victim is going to name themselves so as to provide due process against the person who they're complaining against. The individual who's being complained against has a right to know who's making the complaint against them so that they can defend the claim. So to that end, we need to know who is making the complaint. Now, to the degree that you don't want that publicized, there are some things that we can do, like using first and last name initials, for instance. And I doubt that there will be necessarily hearings by this board, because what you are being tasked to do is, once the complaint comes in, it will be reviewed by my office or my staff, and we'll determine, is it a local claim or is it a state or federal claim? State and federal, we're going to move that on and to the state and federal authorities because they have the wherewithal and they have the statutes that they can do that with. We're only concerned about those unique protected classes that Kalamazoo has defined. And we will look at those, and then there will be an investigation administratively with the city through the city manager or the city manager's designee. My guess is it'll be Ms. Bonner and perhaps somebody on my staff and we may even use the assistance of public safety detectives, because we've done that in the past, in order to find the facts and talk to witnesses. Once we do that, once we come up with an idea, so we have an understanding of what the facts are, then that material will be brought to this board for you to recommend to the city manager, okay, what should happen with this complaint? You will come to the conclusion is either there was no discrimination or there was actionable discrimination, and this is what we recommend the city administration to do. To that end, we don't necessarily have to name the individual who made the complaint or even the person against whom the complaint was made. But there is, unfortunately, you are an open body. There is the possibility of somebody filing a Freedom of Information request. And so to the degree that a complaint is made against somebody and was not sustained, then we would probably not disclose that because it puts that person in an unfair light. On the other hand, if there was a sustained complaint, then that can be made public.
So can I ask a question? For state and federal civil rights law requires that we disclose, correct? Or it requires that the party knows that they are there's a complaint against them. Is that right, or is it just in our bylaws?
That's a question of due process. That's a constitutional right that when somebody's made a complaint against you, you have a right to, if you will, confront your accuser. So you got to know who's making the complaint against you so that you can defend your claim. If you don't know who's making the complaint, how do you defend it?
Okay.
And I just want to clarify, I don't, from the comments that have been made, I don't believe anyone's contending that the respondent would not have that information. The issue is what is made available to the general public. I do have a question for you, Attorney Robinson, just about these hearings then. So you're saying you do not anticipate this board having hearings?
Not necessarily, no. I mean, you could, if you needed further information, but hopefully you're going to hear the results of the investigation and making a determination based upon that information to make a recommendation to the city manager. That's the way we set it up. This is not an adjudicative body.
Thank you, sir.
I have a question about the process for filing complaints. I remember from one of our trainings, I asked whether those forms for filing a complaint would be available in English and Spanish. And I think Director Bonner said that there will be interpreters on the phone to take complaints that are in Spanish, or I forgot the other language, I'm sorry. So I'm wondering, is there a process for that becoming a form? You know, like, is the person on the phone interpreting, like, going to be filling out that form for the person calling?
If that's the only way we can do it, if they can't fill out the form themselves, then that would have to be the way it goes. I mean,
But there are Spanish version of the, there are Spanish versions of the physical forms, correct? Or
there
no?
will be if there aren't. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
Or maybe the better question, Director Bonner, is that when they for the form, is it the process of them calling and someone doing it for them, or are they going online to get the form and fill it out to send it in?
So
Or
Kai, what is the process now? Do you know?
No, I don't.
Okay,
So
because that's a better question.
there is a place on the website that is, if you want to file a complaint, and it's new to this process. So we're still trying to interpret that process into, not interpret, but merge that process. Because right now is if you want to file a complaint about your rental unit, or if there's a street light out. So we're trying to merge it. We're using the same process, and we don't know if it'll work yet because nobody's done it. So I mean, we're all in a learning mode. Right now it's all online, which is, could be problematic as well. So just something we still have to figure out. And I know I've got emails that people are going to file complaints and ask me how to file a complaint. I don't know if any of them have been filed to know if the process is working. That makes it.
Thank you, ma'am.
That is actually my question, Director Bonner, is how will we know if something's been filed? Because we are not an adjudicative body, right? And so we will make a recommendation to the city manager, but I do think that there is value in this body seeing what comes in even prior to the investigative process, so that some of those questions can be answered through the investigation, or that we're able to lodge some of those questions for purposes of investigation.
I don't know. I have to refer to Attorney Robinson about seeing it before the investigation.
I think that we can certainly provide information in a generic fashion by indicating the types of complaints that have come in and where we are in the process of investigating them. That I don't see as a problem. As to the details, I wouldn't want to disclose that for fear of prejudicing the investigation. But if we can give generic information, that's not a problem.
So then, Attorney Robinson, how will we come to a conclusion for a recommendation?
No,
it
it'll be
just-
after the investigation is finished, then you'll get a full packet.
Would we need to at that point if you have completed it?
Well, we would complete the investigation. Again, your job is to make a recommendation as to where things stand in terms of making a recommendation for sanctions or further action.
I think I understand.
May I
I think
ask
that
a
we're trying to
question,
figure
Director
out
Houston?
what way can this body help is really what we're going after, what we're trying to answer. So I think there was some understanding that we would be hearing the complaints or reading the forms or hearing a live complaint or a live hearing and gather and meet and convene and then make a recommendation. But it sounds like your office is going to be doing that. And then we make a recommendation after that for whatever it comes to. But it seems like you will conclude that, and you may have already made the recommendation for us when you've completed the investigation. Or are you just laying out details of facts of what happened and then we make a recommendation? We just want some clarification.
Right. I wouldn't be surprised if part of the is laying out a fact, certainly what's disclosed. There may be a recommendation as to further action or next steps. That'll ultimately be for the board to make that determination. I view this board much like the state civil rights board. I mean, they don't do the actual investigation. They have.
So our role, because this is our role is for not to determine if not there was discrimination. That is for your office to determine after a complaint, through the due process. Our role is based on if there was found to be discrimination. It is our role to determine what the repercussions for that infraction should be.
And you could also hear appeals if somebody disagrees.
Yes.
With,
and then we would only hear cases once either someone disagree or if we felt as a board we needed more information based on the information you provided to us. So we would say, I don't have a clear picture. We need more information. That's when we might go down a hearing path.
Yep.
But that might be few and far between based on some of the Kalamazoo discrimination classes, because it sounds like to me that you have, based on Chapter 18 and 18A, that it pretty much is laid out, and the recommendation for the most part is going to be made. And help me if I said that incorrectly, but it sounds like to me the decision is going to be already made based on what the ordinances have laid out.
I wouldn't say the decision would be made. The facts will be determined, and so that you can have a better understanding of the allegations and the facts in support, both in terms of the complaint or any defense that may be brought by the respondent, so that you have the relevant facts. Then there may or may not be a recommendation in terms of what we've determined, but then that'll be given to this board for that final determination.
Will we be presented with every complaint that has been brought to the city? Or will there be a process of determining within the city attorney's office whether or not it merits lifting up to the board?
Well, we're not going to make that determination as to whether or not it should be investigated or not. If it's a complaint, that it'll be investigated. It'll just depends on what category it falls into. Some of them will be moved on to state or federal authorities, and to that end, that information can be provided to the board. For instance, we received in the last month a complaint on the basis of sexual discrimination, one claim on the basis of race, and one on the basis of age. All of those did not fall within the City of Kalamazoo protected classes, and they were referred to the Michigan Department of Civil Rights for further investigation.
I do have some real questions about the Department of Public Safety investigating civil rights claims. And the wheelhouse of criminal justice officers and the various thresholds, legal thresholds that exist, right? Because somebody who's a victim of discrimination, that looks different than somebody who's been assaulted, right? And I think there's a lot more nuance, which is why I'm kind of getting at the timing of when complaints will come in and the review by the board and what fact-finding actually looks like. And I think that while this isn't an adjudicative body, I do think that the panel that has been assembled, the board that has been assembled, has really critical insights about what discrimination looks like. And so to cut off that process and to have it go to criminal justice officers seems remiss.
Agreed.
Well, I would only say this. We have since 2010 expanded the ordinance to include discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation. In that period of time, we did have one investigation. We did have a detective assist in that investigation. And I don't know that the involvement of that detective negatively impacted either the victim or the respondent's response or in carrying through that investigation.
So
Now,
will we not be hearing 100% of cases? Is that what I'm understanding?
what do you mean by 100%?
If it is applicable, if it's applicable to Kalamazoo, will we be hearing them?
Those cases will be brought to your attention, yes.
But they will be investigated before they get to us.
Yes.
I don't know how I feel about that, but okay.
Well, somebody's got to do the investigation.
Yeah, but
You're not, I mean, and you can't be both the prosecutor and the judge.
But we're not, I mean, I think we've clarified we're not the judge, right? We're not an adjudicative body. We're making a recommendation. But I think that there is a fact-finding purpose that could very easily take place here through questioning, right? Like actually offering questions to the parties and perhaps, asking the city attorneys to look into something. But can I, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, Attorney Robinson, but how many attorneys of color do you have in the city attorney's office?
2
Out of how many?
Out of a staff of 4.
Okay. And how many people who've experienced housing discrimination?
I don't know that.
I mean, and the idea that we've had one complaint based on gender-based discrimination since, we had a policy, given that I spend every day of my paying job doing essentially gender-based discrimination work, tells me, right, that these complaints aren't being lodged. And we need to think about how we investigate them.
So I think what I would like to see this group determine what that, if it's in our purview, what that investigation, because I think I echo what we said of having public safety investigate, especially when we're talking about that are going to investigate complaints based on race with Black and brown individuals that have already not great, like I think it's counterproductive. I think it's a very bureaucratic system that we're asking people to, and I do want to advocate. I don't think it's this board's job to do that investigation. I think it's really important that this board hears facts and not, I think, questioning and things like that. It's important to know that there's facts, but I think this process does have to look different than other processes do, because this is a different board. So I would like to see, and I don't know if that to me feels like a whole agenda topic of what does that fact finding what is our expectations around fact finding, and what questions are important for us to be asked and answered. I think we should dictate what that packet looks like a little bit.
Agree, because we have to be a safe space. If we're going to be encouraging the community, and I apologize, I'm not on camera because there's a baby here. But if we are encouraging the community to come forward, it's very high stakes for people who have been victims of discrimination. And so we have got to have the most transparent, equitable process possible. And if most of these classes that are protected experience inequitable treatment when making complaints. So we can't be a board that understands that and knows that and does the same exact thing as other bodies do. We have got to do it differently, or we're all going to be sitting here once a month on Wednesdays with no complaints to review, because they're not going to feel like it's a safe space.
Go ahead, Director Williams.
I just want to say that Vice Mayor has had her hand raised for a long time, so I'll be very, very quick. I agree completely with Directors Beach and Glenn and Harrington and everything that has been said. And I think my question is, or what I would like to challenge is, at what point this board becomes involved with the complaint. I think that's what we're saying, is that we're feeling like we're becoming involved too late. And how can we rework that process? And not that we take on the investigation, but at what point do we start to matter to the complainant and the defendant, the accuser, not to use too technical jargon. But that's all I want to say. And also that Vice Mayor's been waiting.
I appreciate it. Thank you. You all actually brought up what I was going to ask about, which was clarification from Attorney Robinson on KDPS's involvement in the investigation. And I was going to ask in terms of immigration status and all of that, but you all are taking care of that quite well. So I will sit back and continue to listen.
I wanted to add something really quickly. I obviously don't know how these investigations go. I've never been involved in any, but I do think that you're going to get different facts and different amounts of facts based on the framing that you're applying to the situation. So like, for example, when I lived in like a really poor, brown neighborhood, we'd like occasionally have like grad students from the university nearby come in and like try to like pick our brains. And when I didn't trust them, I would just lie. Like I would just tell them whatever they wanted to hear, and especially if there was some benefit towards me. So I feel like the person asking the questions is definitely going to influence the kinds of questions that are being asked, even if those are seen as standard questions. And then also the kinds of answers that they're going to get are going to be different based on like the perspective of the person asking the questions. I think maybe it's just like a basic scientific thing where like you're going to change the outcome based on like your perspective. So I think that's just something like to think about. And I think, that the questions that Director Glenn was asking Attorney Robinson about his staff were really relevant to that. Because we do like, that's just like a basic level, like the diversity of the people asking the questions and, their experiences and all of that. So at this point, it kind of seems like the people involved in the investigations are like, even if they represent like the races of the community or those sorts of things, like it seems like maybe the amount of people involved in the fact-finding part of the investigation, it's like not enough perspectives. So I guess I'm wondering if like, I don't know how investigations work again, but I'm wondering if they can be split into parts where like there's like some portion of the investigation done and then there's like an opening where like Attorney Robinson can say like, we have these so far, does anybody have like pointers or like ways to move forward or like questions about like how we can get to the next part? Like I don't know how the investigations go, so that's just what I was thinking.
Or do we go ahead, Director Brown?
Thank you. I've been really, really quiet because I'm really trying to understand the mindset of everyone that's part of this board. And I think I first of all, I just want to say I love the diversity of our mindset and where we do definitely come together and are aligned in many ways. Here's an area of alignment. And I just wanted to just provide my 2 cents is that although I have not done investigations for civil rights cases, I have definitely done many investigations for employee rights, and I've been doing that for the last 12 years. One of the things that I wanted to say based on that, where I am concerned is that there isn't a space, or it doesn't seem currently right now, and it sounds like that's what we're considering, but there does need to be a space where we have, based on the investigation, and I'm just letting you know, this is kind of how we did it. There was usually an investigation into the situation. And then from there, based on the investigation, then our investigative body came up with questions. And then there were questions that were presented to the individuals. In this case, it would be the person that's filing the complaint and the person that's doing it. And then if there's any witnesses or anyone that can corroborate and be a part of that. The investigation that's happening, when we talk about fact finding, I think that's important because we do need a basis for what's going on and what questions to ask. And then those questions, I think as us as a team, as a body, that we need to then say, okay, based on what we read and what we understood, what questions should be asked. And what I love about this is that we're diverse enough to Gabby, to Director Dela Cruz. What you're saying there is that, perspectives, you are actually absolutely correct. Perspectives come in and they do create and skew the fact. The facts might be there, but we know, because we've seen through this election, that through a different lens, that different perspective will change the outcomes and what the fact really is. So I would recommend, and as we're, really looking for, just putting my 2 cents in, is to, have those investigations in the way that Attorney Robinson is saying, is have those up front, have those things done. But we would take that, and there would be another part to that where we would take, okay, now that we have this, we have their perspective, we have what they've done so far, that can give us a basis to say what's missing, what are we still not understanding, what is still not being answered, what fact is still missing. And that is where we develop our questions from there, having maybe then those hearings and where we could ask those questions in particular, and then be able to make a more established decision. And I think even a fairer decision, because if now the questions that we ask really align with what we're seeing in the investigation, then that says something. Then I think we can make an easy decision. But if it's not, then that's good too, because that's saying, hey, there's some things, and then maybe we need to ask, hey, maybe, as a recommendation, when you do these type of investigations, could you possibly get this or possibly get that? And so I think that it's a way for us to provide a check and balance, but at the same time, create an alignment of the entire team. And it's not an us versus. I think we've got enough versus going on right now. So as much as that we can come together with the investigative bodies and us being an investigative body in some way, as far as if we're going to make a recommendation, So anyway, that's just kind of my 2 cents, and based on kind of my experience with doing these type of investigative processes. So thank you.
Thank you, Director Brown. I've got something. Okay, go ahead, Director Bonner. I'll keep holding it.
I just want to read the definition, the description of your job based on what we said in the interviews. So I want to, this is right out the ordinance. It's from chapter 18, page 10. Item B, you want to be able to find it quickly. In chapter 18, not 18A, it says review claims of discrimination brought by residents of the city of Kalamazoo and make recommendations for resolution following an investigation of the claim by the city manager or the designee of the city manager. Review claims of discrimination brought by the residents of the city and make recommendations for resolution following the investigation. And so it looks like there's some latitude in there. We just have to figure it out based on what it is without recreating anything. And we just have to work with Attorney Robinson to find out what that first part says, what that means, review claims of discrimination brought by the city of Kalamazoo, because we got the second part, and that's make recommendations for resolution following the investigation. Because that's what we said in the interview. I want to just ground us in what is in where we are and how we need to review it. And before we say we need to do anything else, let's see if it's already there. Okay, so that might be something that Attorney Robinson and I have to talk about and come back with how that looks in the process as it unfolds. And, reviewing civil rights complaints is not new, because this is not a new ordinance, it's just a revised ordinance. So like he said, I've only been a part of a little one, and that's because they called me, and then I gave it to Attorney Robinson real quickly. So that was my whole participation. So can you let us go through that and come back and explain, give some options and stuff of how that'll work? Attorney Robinson, does that work for you?
Yeah, it does. I want to give, perhaps it'll help if I give an overview. Both myself and members on my staff have been doing this type of work for a long time. This is not our first time investigating complaints of discrimination. We do it all the time. And in fact, when there's an internal investigation, when a city employee claims discrimination, they have to file it with the HR department, and under policy, an HR advisor and a member of my office collaborate in investigating the complaint. When we get a complaint, we look at what has been written. Then we look to see, is there any information on this complaint that we need further clarification of? Can we understand what the allegation is, so that we would go to the complainant and say, we don't understand this, or we need further factual development on this. We understand what you're complaining about, but we need to fill in some gaps. So we talk to the complainant. Then we talk to the individual against who they are complaining, and any witnesses. I would envision same thing would occur, in that when a person makes a complaint of discrimination, we're going to look to see, is there sufficient facts here that fall within the scope of the ordinance? If there isn't, then we're going to go to the complainant and ask for more facts to see if we can come within the scope of the ordinance. Or maybe there is evidence of discrimination, but we don't know when it occurred, or there may be witnesses who have seen it, so we're asking for further clarification of that. Then we're going to go to the respondent and say, okay, this is what we've learned. What do you have to say in defense? And I'm going to tell you that my guess is, if you want to have hearings, it's going to be because the respondent is going to say, no, I didn't discriminate. The complainant's got it all wrong, and I want my day in court. Very rarely are you going to hear probably from the complainant who's unhappy with the result, unless we determine that there was no discrimination, that the respondent acted appropriately. Then you may hear from a respondent, but most of the time, or a complainant, most of the time you're going to hear from respondents who feel that they've been railroaded, or that the city is picking on them because they are a landlord. That is what I'm going to predict will occur. So we certainly can keep this board informed as we go through that process. But like I said, me and my staff are accustomed to doing these types of investigations.
So I think
Can I? Go ahead. Oh.
you can go, Director Brown.
Oh, no, and I was saying that, Attorney, thank you so much, Director Beach, but I was saying, Attorney Robinson, and I hope that, we're not being offensive in any way, shape, or form. I believe that definitely, obviously you guys have been doing it, so you know what you're doing, and I want to definitely say I can, support you in that, and I agree that you definitely know what you're doing. You've been doing it. I guess my only concern from, I think, us as a board is that we're asked to make a recommendation. We're asked to decide, make a decision to come up with something. And honestly, I'm just being very honest. And as at least the feeling that I'm getting, that I think we're a little uncomfortable, although we're great that you know what you're doing. It's still, we're not asking, and unless we're possibly asking questions and maybe going a little bit deeper into some of these situations, it may be really hard for us to say, yeah, based on what we read, yeah, here it is. I mean, we could do that and wipe our hands and say, okay, do what you do. But I think this is where I'm saying, if a process, and maybe we say, if we feel it's absolutely warranted, maybe there's something that's just absolutely clear. It's pretty straightforward. There's no, doubt in our minds, as a board. But I kind of feel like if I'm asked to put my name on something, and that's kind of what I feel like I'm asked to do here, to put my name on something, to decide upon something, it's just a little hard reading someone else's words and reading somebody else's and not really hearing the feelings and the other gray stuff. Writing, things are black and white, but things are also very gray, and not having that gray matter available for us in order to make an informed decision. I think that's where I think there's a little bit of maybe uncertainty and uncomfortableness. And if there's a way that can be written into it or, thought about, is I think that's where, and again, I hope I'm understanding the board correctly as I'm listening to you, that there just seems to be like the other stuff that are probably missed. And again, looking at one perspective, as I like how Director Dela Cruz mentioned, not being able to develop our own perspective as a board may be difficult just reading or reviewing some paperwork, if that makes sense.
Well, I'll say this, the ordinance was modeled after what is done in Grand Rapids. And so I think Ms. Bonner and I can certainly contact our counterparts in Grand Rapids to see how they go about it.
I would, so for me, this really raised up, I think it's where I think there's some questions around who's doing the investigation and really what it's going to look like. And I think what I'm hearing is, as a board, we want to be involved in designing what that investigation process looks like to be a more intentional way. Because Attorney Robinson, you guys have been doing this for years. And I think as this is a new board, we want to make sure we're being hold to our mission. So I would ask that if you, Director Bonner and Attorney Robinson, you could reach out to Grand Rapids, and that we put this on the agenda item. We put this on the agenda for next month's board meeting of design, like, what is the investigation process? What is our expectations for, really, what does that packet look like? To Director or to Vice Chair De La Cruz's point, I think we could figure out ways of, there's a lot of great restorative practice people in our community with the Truth and Racial Healing, to where we do have resources in our community to engage this investigation process in a more intentional, different way than a typical investigation process. I think that's what we're trying to drill down to. It's not that I want to investigate, and I don't, but I think we do need to find a happy balance between this typical investigation process and what we are trying to do. I think there's this gap right now. So I would be appreciative if you guys could do some research and come back to what other communities are doing, and if this could be put, because I think this is a big topic, and this is you put on the agenda with a bit more information and a bit more resources, is what I would ask of the group, or hope.
Yeah. I really like that suggestion, Director Beach, and thinking through who the investigators are, and us as a board making that recommendation. And, looking at other municipalities is a good idea. I also just want to lift up that while we've been doing this for, and your office has been doing this, and your attorneys have received the training that, to do these investigations in a capable way, we live in such a supremely inequitable society, right? And I think about my clients who are survivors of domestic violence and sexual assault, and human trafficking and stalking, and who asks those questions at the outset often determines everything moving forward, right? Whether my client can still participate, whether they are re-victimized and re-traumatized in the process by the investigator, despite all of the best intentions And there are entire fields now of study and how to do this questioning in a way that respects the dignity of people that have suffered discrimination. And I don't say this to implicate anybody, but we have to do it better, right? We have to. This board does, we have to through law enforcement. I can't tell you how many interviews I have sat in with law enforcement and the most horrific things have been said to my clients when they're investigating the crimes committed against them, right? When this is the process that's supposed to bring them justice. And I really, I cannot, I just want to say for the record, if it wasn't clear enough, I am completely opposed to law enforcement doing these investigations.
I would raise that up. I want to support Director Glenn in that. I don't think it's an appropriate. I think this is a very specific. Law enforcement is designed to investigate crimes, not these type of complaints. And I think that's a big discussion for our next meeting, because I think it is a big discussion.
I agree. And I also wanted to make a comment. I guess it's more philosophical, but one of my questions to the panel interviewing me for this board, one of my questions to them was, what, in your opinion, what makes you think that this board is actually going to, like, I guess, be groundbreaking, or like, there have been other municipalities across the nation that like will establish these sorts of boards or oversight committees or that sort of thing. And then it's kind of just like, this totally, I don't want to offend anybody, but like they end up serving just like as a stamp, or like a stamp of credibility. And I'm really happy that we're having this conversation, because I think we're really pushing back against that potentially happening. And so I'm glad that we're having it so early on in the board's creation.
Absolutely.
So it sounds like we're all on the same page about that. And I heard Director Beach say that maybe this could be something that we discuss in depth or further at the next meeting. So I just want to say that I support that.
Help me on the language of this, Attorney Robinson. So am I right in this, in the Roberts rules to postpone this discussion for the next meeting?
I don't know that you have to do that. It's just a question of, under Roberts, this is just new business. You're just making discussion. There's been no motion. There's been, so this is just you can continue the discussion at the next meeting without taking action for it, other than saying that it'll be on the next meeting's agenda.
All right, so then, does anyone have any comments, questions, or concerns before we move on? Yes, ma'am. Yes, Director Williams.
Just that I asked that we have that information back from Grand Rapids by next meeting, just so that we can compare their processes and the different nuanced levels of their investigations is my request, please.
Could that be in an email? Oh, it probably could not be in an email before the meeting because of FOIA, right? So we can have a chance to review it beforehand.
Well, it's going to take some time I don't know what people's schedules are in Grand Rapids. Ms. Bonner and I will try to reach out, and we can certainly put together a report of what we learned.
Does that satisfy everyone?
Yes,
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
So,
The next topic of discussion is public awareness of, yes, ma'am, Director Bonner.
so in addition to that, one other thing that was mentioned that I don't know if we need to help with, and I just want to make sure I'm prepared to support, is the discussion of the ordinance and breaking it down piece by piece so everybody understand what the classes are. Is that something you want us to help you with, or something for next time as well? That came up in all of this conversation at the beginning.
Yes, please.
So board, do we want to bring someone in, or do we want to just go line by, like take a section and just plant in that section for that time in the meeting?
Can
'Cause
I
think
say
that
both? And this is why I'm
Yeah,
saying
I would,
if we could have someone who understand, along with Attorney Robinson, whoever else can come and add that clarity, and we can ask questions as we're reading it. I personally would like both, because again, if I'm going to be making decisions with this in mind, I better understand it, and I don't want to misinterpret or misalign myself in any way, shape, or form. So I would like that.
Okay.
And if it's a possibility to have both, that would be great.
So there's quite a bit on 18A, which I think we should start with, especially under section 1. I think we need to pick out some pieces to specifically choose which ones we want to go on for time's sake, for the public, for citizens. Yes, Director Williams. Yes, ma'am.
I agree with the request. Thank you, Director Brown. But I also wanted to underscore something that Director Glenn said earlier. As we are bringing people in to discuss these protected classes, I would like them to have prepared for us practical examples, because I know what racial discrimination looks like. I've lived it. But there were some concerns with that you brought up, Director Houston, in banking, or that Director De La Cruz brought up in terms of undocumented citizens, that I have no practical experience. And so just to see how this discrimination manifests in the real world would be very helpful, I feel like, to me.
Thank you, Director Williams.
And can I just say again that is the reason that getting this information before this diverse body is so mission critical, because those hypotheticals, those experiences, that gleaning of lived experience is just going to be, it's going to be whether or not there's value in the sport or not.
Director Bonner, I have a question. I know that we had training with the Michigan Department of Civil Rights. Could they come again? And I'm not sure if they are at liberty to discuss any cases. I'm sure that that information can be requested. Boya, but can we have them present again for us in our next meeting? What do you all think, board members?
I would first, it would be helpful for me if we could just go through, when you're looking at 18A, when you're going through all of those protected, all of what you talk about, blanket policy, directly related to conviction, rental application fee, source of income, going through all of those laid out, and having just the discussion and talking line by line. And if Director Kit could be here, the people who helped create the ordinances, talk through what the intention was and what our interpretation is, I think that would be a really helpful place to start for me. Like talking about what rental application fees people can collect, because I know that is a big point of contention for a lot of community members. And so I think starting, I'm looking at page 2 and 3 for me of 18A are real, I think would be really helpful to dive into, at least first for me.
I guess I should have asked you. Thank you, sir. Do you think that they would provide real life examples along with going over this? Is probably what I should have asked. Because they've been doing this, they've been doing investigations.
But Michigan Department of Civil Rights will not touch our local protected classes.
Sure, right.
And that's what Director Beach is talking about. So it would have to be like Vice Mayor and Director Kick, those folks who developed those. We can bring you some examples from some of the surveys we did for residents when we were doing our housing study. That report is just getting ready to come out finally. So I could read some of those examples of what people said about housing, and that are in reference to these particular protected classes. but the Michigan Department, that's why we had to separate it, because they won't touch anything but state and
I think to Director Glenn's point earlier, I think through the natural discussion, I think a lot of these real life examples, just by talking through these sections and us all sharing our experiences, because we are from a diverse background, will come out. And I think the idea of having some quotes from the feedback sessions and things like in the housing report would be great as well.
You know,
I think, yeah.
I also think it would be fascinating to hear from some of our local advocates who do this type of work, right? Like inviting the Michigan Immigrant Rights Center attorneys into a meeting, and Farm Workers Legal, who is here, maybe an attorney from the ACLU, or even with our local legal aid society, and talking about some of the housing specific discrimination issues that people face, but may not have had this body or forum previously. I know that's, you know, lawyer heavy, but I do think that there are some general community organizers too. I think about the fact that we had the Bronson Park Freedom Encampment, right? Not long ago. And we have an entire village of homeless folks living in Kalamazoo in the middle of winter who very likely have experienced discrimination. And inviting some folks in to talk about, and that's kind of why I go to the attorneys, because I don't want to put anybody who's faced that discrimination on the spot in this way if they're not a willing party. But asking some of the folks who've done this advocacy for a long time, come in and tell us about what this looks like here, right? With these new protected classes or these new areas where we could find some relief.
So I'm going to ask you all to do that and let me know who you find, and then we will make them a panelist. I'm going to let you all, you know, I'm a strong supporter of staffing, and I am your staff support. And so you find those folks, and I will, oh, somebody sent me a message, hold on. And I will see if, I just got to know, we're ready at the public comment part. So you find those folks and let me know, let's see if they're willing to do this publicly. You got to tell them that this is a public Zoom meeting and that their faces will be all the good stuff. And then we will get their emails and we will make them a panelist, and you all can dialogue with them. You know, and I want you to just be mindful of the time. How much do you want to try to squeeze in one meeting? You know, we got quite a bit of time together. Some of you all will be with me 3 years. So we can space this out so we don't feel rushed, and we can get, you know, focus on things.
Yes, Director Williams, yes, ma'am.
Would it be possible for Chair Houston and Vice Chair De La Cruz to just piecemeal that ordinance and come up with maybe 2 topics? I don't feel like we have to do all of this in our first quarter together, but you know, just we can spend some time and have some profound dialogue, maybe come up with a couple pieces, and then we could come together. I mean, I just think it within our own ranks, we probably know we have a resource base of whom we can call on, who could possibly come and speak. But that would be my recommendation, not try to cover the whole thing before we start to listen to complaints. I mean, maybe we will have that luxury, but if we can't, just maybe coming up with a couple per meeting. To Ms. Director Bonner's point.
Do you all think that specifically covering the supplemental Kalamazoo's protected classes would be too much, or an okay amount for a meeting, or should we cut those down even?
I think you two should tell us, because y'all are in charge and we will follow your lead. That's my personal opinion.
Well, we can talk about it, Chair Houston, if that's okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I trust you too.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Any other questions or comments or concerns? All righty. So we're going to keep it rolling, keep it moving to citizens' comments. Are there any citizens' comments at this time?
Yes, actually, there is one voicemail. One moment while I get it queued up here.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Sean O'Brien. I am a resident of Kalamazoo. I live on Stockbridge Avenue. My concern is we have the Civil Rights Board here in the city of Kalamazoo. However, the city manager and city attorney are going to dictate which complaints they're going to hear. And if we're focusing on transparency, I say that the board can investigate themselves. They can decide which complaints they want to hear, and they can send a team from the board to investigate them. These are not criminal complaints, felonies or misdemeanors. These are definitely citizens' rights being violated. But I totally disagree with the police department investigating and the city manager and the city attorney then coming to them, telling them what they're going to listen to and which complaints they're going to make a decision on. This is a disservice to the citizens of Kalamazoo, and then there's no need to have a civil rights board who truly have no teeth or no power. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any more comments, citizens' comments?
That's the only message we've gotten at this point.
Thank you very much. Any miscellaneous comments by any board members at this time?
I would just like to I just want to say thank you guys. It is what's happening in our country currently in DC has highlighted what we all know is just the inequality, racism, and hate that is here. And it is very nice to spend an evening when there's a lot happening on the news talking about how we can make the community a better place. So not nowhere else I would want to be on a Wednesday night with you Wednesday night. So it's a pleasure. And it's a hard 2021. Here we go.
Thank you, Director Beach. I will call on you in a moment, Director Williams. I actually want to thank the citizen for her comment, I believe, Sean. So thank you so much. We definitely hear you. We're not sure if you're watching tonight, but it is a topic that we've talked about and that is being looked at to see how broad we can go. So thank you so much for your concern. And we've talked about it and we are looking into seeing what we can do to investigate these matters. Director Williams.
First, thank you again for the citizen comment. And thank you, Director Beach. I felt you in my heart. I appreciate that. And I feel exactly the same way. I want to say that I am frustrated and unnerved as I sit with you all this evening, not just on the riotous assault on our American democracy, but on the lackadaisical and hypocritical response by the police. I remember just a few months ago at St. John's Church, where peaceful protesters were gathering, they were tear gassed by our sitting president, who wanted the space for a photo op. And I would not be myself if I didn't speak my truth and what's on my heart tonight. And I have to say that had this been a Black Lives Matter protest and Black, brown, African-American, Latinx people stormed our nation's capital and the floors of the House and the Senate, if African-American and brown people had scaled the walls of our nation's capital, destroyed federal property, left pipe bombs, and ignored the curfew that was set forward by that city's mayor in this American symbol of democracy, those individuals would have been handcuffed, arrested, and most likely dead. I feel like what happened today bothers me in a way that unfortunately I've become accustomed. I feel like the occurrences in our nation's capital and across the country, as we're finding out, underscores the importance of our work as these advocates, as we've called to be, for civil rights and the importance of this board. And I agree with Director Beach that I would want to be anywhere but in this positive spot, in this positive space, trying to figure out ways that I, in our small town, can make a difference. Thank you.
I agree with those comments. Are there any others by any other board members at this time?
Yes, I'm sorry, I have my hand raised. This is Director Harrington.
Yes, ma'am.
I just wanted to see if we could put out a request. I know that there is a GARE study that was done surrounding housing equity in Kalamazoo, and this is directed at Director Bonner. Do you think that there's a place for this Civil Rights Board to view that document and be familiar with it?
Can I answer that now? I don't know what's appropriate. And so that document will be released. It is a federal doc. It's a part of a federal report and has to go through a 30-day public comment period. And so I just got the final portion from the Community Foundation. And so hopefully we will be opening up the public comment period within the next 3 to 4 weeks. And then it is open access for everybody. I will make sure that you are aware of when the comment period opens. I would make sure you have the link, the website where it will be at, and I would appreciate a set of eyes to make sure that it is, federal worthy, because it has to go to the FHEO, Federal Housing Employment Opportunity. I think that's what it's called. So you would be able to see it all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Bonner. Thank you, Director Harrington. What about any other comments?
Hi, I wanted to make a comment, and I wanted to also, I resonate with, I can feel this energy on the board right now. And maybe it's just my empathy. Director Williams, Dr. Williams, I appreciate you allowing your heart to show right now. And I think that we all resonate with you and support you in your feelings in that. I wanted to just make a quick comment that I agree. I think it's so important that we had that previous conversation in considering how we want to investigate this. Although it was one comment, it was just so aligned. Like I was trying my best to kind of hold myself together, but it was so aligned with, and then what does that tell me? That tells me that we really did choose a board that is listening to the community, that understands the needs of the community, that takes into account what the community is asking for and what the community is saying. And I think that's so important. If we're going to represent the community, we ought to really represent. We have a House of Representatives, but do they represent? And that's where I want to say that I'm so excited to hear those, because like I said, although I personally have not done many of these housing things, as I know Director Glenn and Director Beach have definitely been involved with, and I hear this great jargon from you, but it also says that you guys are you're representing your community, your unit, the things that the people that you have come in contact with, you're bringing that to the board as well as everyone else. And I think that's just such a beautiful thing. That comment, I just can't just say it enough, how aligned. I mean, it was like she sat right here and had this conversation with us just a few moments ago. And so this says a lot to me. This actually encourages me as someone who may, like I said, who may not have as much experience in that aspect of things, to know that we're bringing real factual, actual, precise information from our community to this board in order to make decisions. So I just wanted to make that comment. Thank you all for being so open and not bringing just your perspectives, but the perspectives of the community into this. And that comment definitely resonated and supported exactly what you're bringing to this board. So again, very excited to be here and working with all of you.
Any other comments? Absolutely, go right ahead.
I mostly wanted to thank Director Graham-Williams for her comment, because I completely agree, and you said it so eloquently. It reminds me, I think everything's connecting, and earlier Director Beach mentioned restorative justice, in passing. And I think that's because you're so used to thinking about it. Like we don't have to like have a full discussion about it, but I've been thinking about it a lot too. And the idea of pandemic as portal, and really moving forward and thinking about like, transformative justice and how we can actually change the system. And so Director Graham Williams' comment, and then also Director Beach's comment, in our whole conversation, just really, my mind is really thinking about accountability and how important that is to the restorative justice process. Because without responsibility and accountability, there's just no moving forward. You can't even bring a party to the table if they don't agree that they've done some harm. And so I'm really glad that, like Director Brown said, I'm really glad that this board has come together, because I think we're going to have really good movement forward. And I feel really confident that this is a really good use of my time. I really feel like that. Thank you.
I agree with that. It's a disgrace what's going on. And I was talking to my dad about it a little bit, and much of what Director Dr. Graham has specified is absolutely true. And tonight, open up the dialogue the way that we opened up the dialogue helped me see that we want to be effective. We want to take action, and we want to move forward, and we don't want to have problems that are reoccurring. And to me, one of the things that caused me, and it's affirmed tonight, to join this board is because I saw potential for Kalamazoo to be an example. I don't know how many other places that are out there, whether that other municipalities are out there that are doing what we're doing. Obviously, we know that there are state and federal responses, but I don't know any other cities that I've not looked to see what we're doing, and for that I'm grateful that it affirms that we want to be effective and move in a direction that I believe is leadership, a leadership perspective from a municipality standpoint. So I'm very thankful to work with all of you. Any other comments? Yes, ma'am. Go ahead, Director Lund.
I want to thank you all for this time that you have devoted to doing this work and having these conversations, and to the city staff who are going to sit through these really uncomfortable situations or conversations, because we're going to have them, right? Like the body that we have created, the board that you have assembled, we're going to have these conversations. And, to Director Vice Chair, Director De La Cruz's comment, creating these additional classes, what we have said to a greater segment of our community is you matter, right? You matter, and harm is being done to you, and that is unacceptable here. And it takes us further in the direction of a fully actualized city, right? Of who can we be? And how can we ensure that people in our community have a safe place to live, and that their human dignity is acknowledged and respected and enforced? And so I just want to, that the commenter was amazing. I think that public comment, and I hope we get more, and I hope people listen and watch these virtual meetings, because I hope we can have some of these hard conversations, because if we're not, right, then I see the value of this board as a court of public opinion almost, right? We're not an adjudicator, or we haven't landed on what that looks like yet, or an investigator, but it's an opportunity to bring to light some of these systemic inequalities. And to Dr. Graham Williams' point too, the tear gassing happened here. It happened here in Kalamazoo. of kids who are out there exercising their civil rights, right? And there is this listening process for law enforcement and what we can do better. But these bigger conversations that are happening with the community, I hope we can foster the forum for that too, and give space to some of those conversations about how we have to do better. So I thank the commenter and all of you and all of your time, and Attorney Robinson, I apologize in advance for all of the very tough conversations we're going to kind of force you into, because we're going to have them. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you. What about any other comments? All right, hearing no. As chair, I'd like to join the meeting. Recognize Director Beach.
I think he was saying bye.
Wait, do I have to vote? Do we have to vote, or there's a sleeping baby? There's a sleeping baby. Okay. So goodbye. Good night, everybody.
I'm sorry. I thought we had to vote. You all have a meeting. Happy New Year working with you all.
Good night, everyone. Bye.